Hi, welcome to Hope and Belonging Highlight. I'm Allison Wickline Burns, and joining me for today's highlight is Jennifer Anderson, a foster care supervisor at DePaul. Jennifer, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Allison. I'm happy to be here.
So, before we get started, we just want to do a quick warning to our viewers. We are going to be discussing a sensitive topic today, child abuse. So, please just watch with care. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. So, Jennifer, as someone who works in child welfare, how prevalent is child abuse in our communities in Virginia?
Well, currently, Allison, there are about 5,000 children in foster care in Virginia, all of whom have experienced abuse or neglect at some point. It's really hard to know the exact number of children who experience abuse in our communities. Experts estimate that 1 in 4 girls experience sexual abuse, and as many as 1 in 15 to 1 in 20 boys also experience sexual abuse in our community.
Wow. So, when we talk about child abuse, is it always visible? How can we, as people in the community, keep an eye out for youth that we're interacting with? What are some warning signs? And just talk a little bit more about how we can kind of recognize it.
Sure. So I think it's important to start with understanding that there's different kinds of abuse. Children experience physical abuse, they experience sexual abuse, neglect, or just um, emotional maltreatment. And so the signs for each of those can be a little bit different. But understanding that when you are interacting with children, that like there's not necessarily one definitive sign for child abuse, but when you hear some of these possible signs, if they happen in combination or they happen frequently, it should give you pause to think about, is this something I should be concerned about? So we know that if you notice that there is a sudden change in a child's behavior, a child that was maybe super outgoing suddenly becomes withdrawn, or a child who is more quiet becomes more aggressive, that may be a sign that something is not going well for that child. If a child has unaddressed medical or physical needs that are just seeming like they're not getting cared for, maybe they're complaining about teeth that hurt, or maybe they have bruises or unexplained injuries that you notice on them. Um, Sometimes children who are experiencing abuse and neglect are seem to be super watchful or maybe vigilant, like they're always anticipating something happening. So they sort of seem like they're on edge, or they're always asking, like, who's that? What's next? Asking lots and lots of hypervigilant types of questions. They seem to have no adult supervision. Maybe you're interacting with a child in your neighborhood or at the school or at church who just kind of shows up without grown-ups. Often that might be a sign that they're sort of not being well cared for or neglected. But again, none of these things by themselves could you say definitively a child is being abused, but they're just signs that you might think to yourself, I wonder if this child's okay, and is there anything else we should do? I think we also think about child abuse in terms of the signs in the child, but there are also signs in grown-ups that perhaps they are struggling to parent, or maybe their parenting style is unsafe. And so thinking about that in the adults that you interact with is also super important. Um, Sometimes you may encounter an adult who really has little concern for the child that they are responsible for. They often um, won't respond to, like, perhaps school requests for help. They just don't seem to have any concern for the child. They may blame the child for problems at home that are not a child's responsibility. And they may be a person who embraces really harsh physical discipline, or um, bizarre discipline techniques that feel like they would be hurtful or embarrassing or somehow harmful to the child, rather than teaching the child something that they need to learn. Um, Again, viewing the child as bad or worthless, or demanding things from a child that are not age appropriate, or expecting perfection from a child. again, none of these individual things, we all as parents may have moments where we haven't been an A plus parent, but when you start to see these things in combination or in combination with the signs in the child, that would should give you pause and concern and think, is there something going on with this family that they need help and support that they're not getting?
So, what do you think would be surprising for people to know about child abuse, or a big misconception, or something that you wish people, I guess, understood maybe about this idea of
Yeah.
child abuse, what it can look like, anything like that?
Yeah, I think people underestimate the effect that child abuse has on children past the incident of abuse. I think
Right.
all of us can understand that being abused is bad and that it's not right to be hurt. And if a child is hurt, we want to care for that child. But I think that maybe folks in the community may not really understand how long-term effects, how that affects children really long term, how experiencing abuse and neglect, experiencing violence in your home can change the way that your brain grows and responds. And that doesn't just go away when the abuse stops, right? Those are changes that take a long time to create and they take a long time to undo. So sometimes children who have experienced abuse and neglect, they struggle in school, they struggle in church, they struggle in community settings because they're still living in the fear of the bad things that happened in the past, even though they might be safe now, even though their families may have changed and grown and gotten the help that they need, or maybe they're in a foster home, or maybe they've even been adopted and it has been years since they experienced the abuse. But those lingering effects last a very long time. And it is something that each child has to learn and grow and change through, and it takes time to do that.
So, in your experience, I know there are a lot of things we can talk about. What are some ways, or what do you think is key to preventing child abuse or recognizing when it's happening, specifically as it does relate, again, in your experience, to children and teens who may be at risk of entering the foster care system or are vulnerable in some way?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to think about that question. I think there's community response, right? The things that a community can do to ensure that all their children are safe. And then there are individual actions that you can take or know about. So I'd like to talk a little bit about both on both of those levels. So I think as a community, I think it's really important that families have access to um, supports that strengthen the family economically so that families aren't struggling to meet their basic needs. I think it's also important that we promote positive parenting skills, right? Like that as a community, we agree that safe, healthy parents are important and we invest in that. And then I think it's really important in today's world that we enhance social connections so that parents are not parenting in isolation, especially when you have young children. If you are all alone, that is very hard. And our community should be reaching out and helping parents and connecting with parents so that families aren't struggling by themselves. And I think those are some of those things can be within your neighborhood, within your extended family, within your church community, within your school community, with your coworkers and peers. Like all of those places can impact the safety and well-being of children. But I think there's also things that as an individual we can do to help ensure that the individual children that we know are safe, right? And some of that is learning to recognize signs of abuse, right? When you see something that seems different for a child that you love, or that they have unexplained injuries, or someone's not caring for their medical needs, like recognizing that that is not normal and that's not healthy. You can also do your best to support the families you know. You can reach out to families who have young children, or for families who have teenagers who are struggling, and say, "Hey, do you need anything? Can I stop by for a cup of coffee, or can I watch the kids while you go out tonight?" Actually making those connections with the people that you know and are in your natural network. Um, And then report concerns. If you are concerned about a child's well-being, if you think that they're being neglected, don't ignore that or try to explain it away. It is not your job as a member of the community to investigate child abuse concerns, but it is your job to report it and let the people who really understand and can do the real investigation do that. So reaching out to your local DSS office or your local police department if you suspect child abuse is one action that you can always take. And then if you are a parent and you're struggling, practicing self-care and asking for help, right? We know that being a parent is a really hard job, and there are moments for all of us where we feel overwhelmed or frustrated or concerned. Um, and asking for help and taking the time to take care of yourself will only enhance you as a parent.
Yeah, I think just that's really important, and recognizing that all parents, no matter what you're dealing with, you sometimes need help. And that's okay to ask for help. And it doesn't mean you're a bad parent. And it doesn't mean
Yeah,
you aren't doing a good job. It just means you need help at that point. So,
yeah, for sure.
all right. Well, thank you so much for your time today and the insight. And we will have more information and resources related to this topic on our website as well, for our viewers to check out. And for our viewers, thank you so much for your time today as well, and for sticking with us as we explore this Hope and Belonging Highlight series. And stay tuned. We will be back next month with another Hope and Belonging Highlight.